I'm sharing with you a series of lessons which I'm calling Climate Changers. Climate Changers. And what we're talking about is how to implement effective change, good change within an organization. It's a leadership series, and I pray that the thoughts that I share with you help you to become more effective in leading your organization. This particular lesson, I'm entitling it, Is the Weather Changing? Is the weather changing? See, one of the first things that you have to do as a leader of any organization is to determine what is the climate of our organization. What is our attitude toward change? Do we look at change as a threat or a challenge? Do we look at change as a friend or an enemy? A way we can say that is our church. Is it open or is it closed toward change? Good question, because unless we can answer that effectively, we're not going to be able to implement change successfully. Another question we could ask is, what is our attitude toward change? Is it friendly, embracing it, or is it hostile, attacking it, seeing it as the enemy, and trying to fight against it? Another question that we could ask that help you to picture this in your mind, is the tide rising against you? In other words, what is the attitude toward your leadership? If the tide is rising against you, then you're not going to be able to be a successful leader at that point. You do not have enough capital. You don't have enough change in your pocket to implement change in your church. So there's some things that you're going to have to do as a leader before you will be able to successfully lead through change. Let me give you 3 different climates that resist change. And there are others, but these are 3 that stand out above the rest. First one is the fight over. And what we're talking about is adversarial environments, where it's us against them, where we're fighting each other, attacking each other, and we view each other with suspicion. We don't trust one another. It's exceptionally difficult to secure implementation of a good change in a church that is disrupted with adversarial relationships. If people are fighting each other, the first thing you've got to do is stop the fight. You've got to bring a peace treaty. And that's what you really need to be focusing on. If you're involved in a church that's involved in fighting itself, there's a big war going on, it's usually wiser for you as a leader to focus on healing the church, healing the conflict before trying to implement the change. This is not a time to implement change. This is a time to focus on healing. See, here's what happens. If you attempt to bring about change without healing the conflict, very little is going to be accomplished. They're not following you. They're not following your leadership. And so instead of them following you in this change, they're being suspicious of each other. And usually what the response is not acceptance and approval of the change. It's just a compromise that evades the central issue for the change. They're really not changing the environment. They're just saying we're going to stop fighting at this time. So I would encourage you, if you're in a hostile environment where they're attacking each other, fighting each other, bring about peace first before you try to implement change in your church. The second environment is what I would call apathetic environments. Has the wind stopped blowing? Apathetic. Every time I hear the word apathy, it reminds me of the story in a college class, college freshmen that walked in, sat down in their seats, and the professor starts writing on the board, A, And one of these college freshmen is looking at that, and he's trying apathy, and he turns to his friend and says, "What's apathy?" And his friend says, "I don't know. Who cares?" Now that's exactly what apathy is. Apathy, it's a dead environment. And some churches are too dead to have a fight. They're too dead for adversarial relationships. No. And so what you're going to have to do, you're going to have to deal with this attitude of apathy. See, the truth is, there are many people that they've ceased to care what happens. They just don't care anymore. I discovered that many years ago as a pastor that there are many people in the church, they don't care if you have service tonight or tomorrow night, or that they're not planning to come anyway. So it doesn't matter to them. Have church all you want to have church because they're not going to be there. They don't care. And so you have to deal with this. See, it's what we would say, they're too dead to fight. There's not going to be any fights. They're too dead for that. I remember the pastor that talked about the adversarial relationship in marriage. And he said, I used to counsel young couples that were fighting with each other. Well, maybe you need to just separate for a while and at least you'll stop the fighting. And he said, I don't do that anymore because as I've got older, I've got wiser. And I've discovered that as they get older, they'll get tired. And when they get tired, then they will naturally stop fighting. And that's the way it is for too many churches. They're too dead to fight. So when you have this apathy, when apathy dominates an environment, it's very difficult to be able to arouse the support that's necessary to implement the change. They're not going to pay for it. They're not going to do the work. They're not interested in that because they're too dead. Here's the third environment that resists change. Are your people too comfortable? A comfortable environment. An environment where they've just gone to sleep and they don't want anyone to awaken them, to arouse them. Perhaps that is the most dangerous condition. It's to be satisfied with the current conditions. We like it the way it is. See, what comfortable people have been blessed beyond their expectations. They never expected it to be this good. And so they're happy the way things are. The attitude that they have is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Leave it alone. Let sleeping dogs lie there. That is their attitude toward life. And so most comfortable churches, they're not dying, but they're not growing either. That's a dangerous place to be, where you're just comfortable the way it is. It's not dying, but it's not growing. They're what we would say, they become content to live on yesterday's blessings. Oh yes, they'll talk about the good old days, about the good times they have, but they're not willing to do anything to make a difference. Now here's a question that all of us as leaders need to face from time to time. What do you do when people are leaving the church and tithes and offerings are down? What do you do? The correct answer to that question is you begin looking around for things that you can change that will reach new people. That's the correct answer to that question. But sadly to say, that's not what usually happens. No, unfortunately, what usually happens is survival goals begin to take over. And the church begins to try to recreate yesterday's success. They start trying to go back to yesterday. But the problem is, yesterday is gone. We will never be able to relive yesterday. It is gone, for better, for worse. What we've got to do is prepare today to move into tomorrow, into our future. And so I want to focus on 7 ways how we can help to create a climate of change. How we can change the climate so it will be conducive for change in the future. Here's the first thing. The first thing is recognize this will not be easy. It's been well said, if it was easy, somebody else would have done it. I agree with that. The challenge is for you and I, we've got to rise and say, I'm willing to pay whatever the price to have a good, successful future, to succeed into tomorrow. What can I do that's going to make tomorrow better? Here's the second thing that we can do to help change the climate. Understand the value of patience, persistence, and integrity. 3 key words that a leader must have. Patience. I've not been very good at that. Patience. I've been too impatient. But patience is a great virtue. Persistence. Now, I've been better at that. Persistence. I plan to be back tomorrow. I'll be back next week. I'll be back next month. See, persistence. I'm not going to quit. And then integrity. God help all of us to have integrity. Without integrity, people cannot trust you. They think that you have hidden values, hidden motives, secret things that you're keeping from them. So if we're going to implement change, then we're going to have to make these a priority in our life. Patience, persistence, and integrity. The third thing is we got to improve the environment, making it supportive of change. Improving the environment. And this is where I want to spend the majority of my time. I want to focus on things that you and I can do that helps to implement the change by improving the environment. To improve the environment, that should become our goal. The first thing is improve your pastoral care. It's well said, people do not care how much you know until they know how much you care. That is such a true statement. You've got to let the people know you care about them. This is not about we're just wanting to change things for the sake of change. No, we're wanting to bless your life. We're wanting the future to be better for your family. So you've got to improve your pastoral care. Look for things that you can do to reach out to them. Look for things that you can do that shows them that you are listening to them. People are very interested in that. They must know that we are listening, that we hear what they're saying. If they do, then they are more open to listen to what we have to say if they know we're listening to them. The second thing is, we need to identify all the groups that will be affected by the change and then win their approval. There are different groups in every church. It doesn't matter how small, you're going to find more than one person. And they all have their vision. Everyone has the things that are important to them. You need to identify those groups that's going to be affected by the change and then start strategically making decisions to win their approval. The third thing that we need to do, we need to introduce a temporary committee. Some call this an ad hoc committee. I remember one time I was serving on a group of churches, and I came up with the idea of an advisory committee. And I believe it was a God-given idea. A temporary committee. It's not going to last a long period of time, but what they do, they give new ideas. They get communication flowing. They get people talking and thinking again. That will help to change the environment, developing an environment that will embrace change. The fourth step is you need to identify the respected leaders and the influencers who can help to legitimize the new ideas. In every church, it's this way. There are people that other people listen to them. They may do it because they have the money, or they may do it because they're the oldest member of the church, or they may do it because they have the biggest family. There's different reasons, but you need to identify them and make friends with those people. Make friends with them because they are going to help you to be able to influence the church, the congregation, how to implement the change. That's where you need to start. The fifth thing is you need to recognize and celebrate little victories. Oh, this is so important, so important. I remember many years ago, I discovered this principle that people, they're going to talk. Oh yes, people will always talk. So what do? We give them good things to talk about. Start looking around for just little success. It doesn't have to be a big deal. In fact, it usually isn't. If you're going to start trying to implement an environment for change, you're going to have to start with little things. But every time a little thing, a good little thing happens, celebrate that. Talk about that. Present that to the congregation. Let them hear that story. They're going to talk, so give them good things that they can talk about. Then the sixth thing that we can do, if we're going to help to change the climate, change the atmosphere, we need to start developing good communication systems. I'm afraid this is where too many of us as leaders, we fail. We think because something is clear to us that everybody else understands it. They don't. They do not understand what we're talking about. So we've got to develop ways of communicating it. And one of the ways that you do that is you learn how to say the same thing over and over again in a different way. You learn to say it in a sermon. You learn to say it with songs. You learn to say it with testimonies. You learn to say it in celebrating victories. You see, there's so many different ways that you can communicate it. But communication, as the church grows, communication becomes more difficult and challenging, but more important. Because the more people that you're dealing with, the more difficult it is for us to communicate. So learn to repeat things. Say them over and over again in 100 different ways until you make sure that everybody knows what you are talking about. And then the seventh thing. The seventh thing is learn to use crisis situations to help implement change. See, crises are going to happen. There's always going to be problems that arise. Storms will come. There will be an earthquake. There will be a fire. There will be a tornado. There's going to be a problem sooner or later. There's going to be a problem. And when a problem comes, that's a good time to start implementing change. Because suddenly people recognize something needs to be done. We've got a problem. Well, now that you've got their attention, it's a time you can start communicating some ideas about a preferred future. You can start communicating the way that we can improve this and make it better. One of the ways that you need to think of it, think of change. Think of it like fire. That's right. Think of it like fire. Change is a lot like fire. Fire can be your friend or it can be your enemy. It depends on the way it is used and the way it is controlled. It's a powerful force. If you manage it properly, it will serve you. For instance, fire can become like the picture of the lamp. Fire can illuminate your environment. It can cook your food. It can warm your cold house. Fire can be a blessing to you if you manage it properly. But if you don't, If you mismanage it, you'll get burned. You'll get blamed for the problem. You'll get blamed for making it worse. Instead of you creating an atmosphere that's conducive for change, you will create an atmosphere that resists change fiercely, and you will suddenly find yourself unemployed. You will no longer be the leader. So you've got to learn how to deal with it, and deal with it in the right manner, in the right way. Now, as a leader, we must always be observant to what is going on around us. Observe the atmosphere. What is the weather like? Which direction is the wind blowing? That is important, because if you don't know where you are, it's going to be difficult for you to know which direction to go. If you don't know the past, if you don't know the present, how can you know the future? One of the ways that it's a signal, it shouldn't be a controlling factor for you, but it should be a signal. It's what I would call the silent vote. The silent vote. It's always there. People are always voting. Now, personally, I do not like to constantly be being asked people to vote on things, but I am continually registering the silent vote. What do I mean by the silent vote? I'm talking about attendance and money. Attendance and money. Attendance. People vote with their feet. If they like something, they'll be there. If they don't like it, they're not going to be there very long. They will vote with their feet and leave. And then there's the money. Oh yes, money is always a factor. The money is, people will put their money on things they value, things that are important to them. And so if they're not giving their money, it's because they do not believe in the vision. They do not believe in the change. They're not interested because they don't think this is a good direction to go. And so that's the silent vote. Every church has that. Every leader has to deal with that, because people are going to continually be showing what they really value by the things they attend and where they put their money. So as a leader, you've got to constantly be aware of that. You've got to constantly be watching for that. And by being aware of knowing where you are and what's going on around will help you to make good decisions on how to implement change. See, learn to think of it in steps, not in one great leap forward. No, in the small steps. It's one of the things I've discovered as a leader is one of the reasons that people fail to follow us is the step is too big for them. They can't take that kind of step yet. So make it in small steps, baby steps, that they're able to implement it, that everybody can do it. When you make it a simple, easy plan, a simple, easy step, people will be more willing to follow you. Communicate that. Say it again and again, over and over again. You'll say it until you're tired of saying it, but they're just now hearing it for the first time. And so learn to communicate it and repeat it, because repetition is the mother of all learning. God help us as leaders to be able to determine what is the climate, what is going on, which direction is the wind blowing. And one of the things that we can do as a leader is be looking for small signs that the wind may be changing. Look for these small signals, these small signs. Many times it may be grandmother. She compliments your sermon, or she is complimentary about something that changed, but she likes that new song. Boy, that is a signal to you as a leader. And so what you need to do is constantly be looking for those little things and then celebrate them. Celebrate them. Point that out. Put that person on the platform. Give that person the microphone. Let them say just a word. Tell the people what they told you. See, that's good leadership. By doing that, we're helping to implement the change. We're helping to create an atmosphere where change is not seen as the enemy, where we're not closed to the ideas. No, rather we're looking around and saying, maybe we can do this better than we've done it before. See, I bought into change. I really believe that the largest room in the whole world is the room for improvement. I believe that. I believe that with all of my heart. So I'm constantly looking for this. But I realize not everybody is. There's some people that they're in a dead atmosphere. There's others that are in a hostile and adversarial relationship, and they're just trying to survive the fight. And there's others, they're just comfortable. They like it the way it is. And so what you have to do as a leader is meet people where they are and then help them gradually either wake up, bring them back to life again, or to help them realize this may be good, but I know something that's better. And when you begin to show that and communicate that to them effectively, you're helping to change the atmosphere, which will make it conducive for successful change. It's one of the biggest challenges that we have, but I remind you, have patience, perseverance, and integrity. And if you will focus on those three things as a leader, it will help you to be able to create an atmosphere where change will be productive and conducive for the future. I pray that God helps you and me as we lead our people through successful changes.